Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel for the next installment in our new figure showcase series. And for today's episode, we're going to jump back into the MCU and take a look at the Scarlet Witch 6-scale figure by Hot Toys from the Disney Plus Wandavision show. Needless to say, I'm pretty excited to finally have this figure in hand following endless delays. At one point, this figure had actually been on pre-order for about 2 years. So regardless, happy that they finally released her. So let's talk a little Wandavision and Phase 4. Phase 4 has been extremely divisive with a lot of people. There's a lot of dislike for the decisions made, and I think the Disney Plus shows have been responsible for a lot of that kind of disenchantment with the franchise. I personally am still fully invested, and I think as the inaugural MCU show on Disney Plus, WandaVision was amazing. It started with a journey through different areas of sitcom world, but quickly evolved into a great mystery of what happened to Wanda that essentially ended with her turning into a villain. And it was a bit of a study in grief, really cementing Wanda as one of those great characters, I think, in the MCU. And the show did a great job giving us some insight into her past with some really incredible moments. I mean, for me, the moment that the Stark bomb hits her home, as well as the moment when she discovers the remains of Vision's body, those were highlights of her journey. And I think the moment that she emerges out of the Westview protective bubble to confront the SWORD team was one of those amazing just shows of full power, and also that hint of transformation to a villain. Now, Hot Toys did release 3 figures from the series, and besides this one, I did pick up the White Vision, passing on the other version of the character since I didn't think he was sufficiently different from the Age of Ultron version. But when it came to Wanda, first of all, this is the first time she's actually identified as the Scarlet Witch in the MCU, and as a result, she did end up getting a full suit upgrade. Now, there is one other version of her that I have on pre-order, and that's the version from Multiverse of Madness, and I do like that the figure does feel a little darker to this one, so you can almost showcase Wanda's evolution from villain to hero back to villain. So with all that said, let's look at the package we're getting from Hot Toys. First thing is, she doesn't really come with much. You get some spare hands, some magical effect pieces, her cloak, which is actually fairly large, and then a display stand that does include a flight pole. Since Wanda does really highlight her flight powers in the final parts of the show, it's kind of a nice piece to get. But overall, a more straightforward release. Oh, and you do get some button cell batteries here for a light up feature, which I'll discuss later on in the review. But suffice to say, I considered not even showing that off, but reconsidered, and even though I'm not really going to use it much, I did want to see how it functioned and looked. But let's jump into the accessories a little bit more in depth, and we'll start with her hands. Now, she comes with a more relaxed set already on the figure, and then you get an additional pair of normal looking hands, just in some magical hex poses. And they look great with the nice detail work around the gloves and the posed fingers, which are all contorted in that Wanda norm. Now, the other hands are interesting because they're actually molded in this slightly translucent red plastic, which is brighter at her fingertips and then becomes darker and less see-through towards her wrists. And they're also molded in that contorted way to create the appearance that she's casting hexes, and also to allow her to hold the magical effect pieces and to have that nice blend between her hand and the piece. Now, next are those magical pieces, and one thing I will say, I think a character like Wanda deserved way more than we have here. I mean, it just seems like there was definitely the possibility for some additional effects to give her more display options, but we are still getting 2 very nice ones that are slightly different from each other. First thing I noticed, as opposed to some of the previous releases, the Wanda releases, is that the effects appear to be a little darker in nature. Still translucent, but just darker. Overall work here though is great, with all the swirls of magical energy and the color variations along the height of the piece, making it feel almost alive. Next up, you get the Darkhold itself, which is supposed to be a compendium of dark spells and a record of dark magic, and it's really nicely done with actual writing on the pages and a weathered look to them. Now, one of the pages that you can open to includes the page from the show that basically showcased the Scarlet Witch, which is a nice bit of attention to detail. Beyond that though, the binding on the book and the covers are really well detailed, replicating that ancient look to it. I will also mention that we did see another version of the Darkhold in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in the season that included Ghost Rider, which to me was my personal favorite. Now, I know a lot of people will say that show wasn't canonical to the MCU, but with all this multiverse stuff, I like to think it is. So to me, this is now just another appearance of the book, and Hot Toys did a nice job on the piece. Next up, you get her cloak, which is actually, like I said before, really big, and it's wired along the edges, but looking closely at the print on it, there's a lot of great pattern work printed onto the fabric. The pattern is very symmetrical, and it reminds me of what you see on Vision's cape in terms of at least the geometry. I'm sure the costume designers wanted to link the 2 characters together, which is why you're getting that appearance. But it looks really nice, and it also includes a wired hood, although you can't use the hood with the figure. Or at least I wasn't able to, so it just goes along for the ride. Now the inside has a nice burgundy lining, and the feel of the piece is overall nice. Not too heavy and not too cheap feeling. And of course, you do have a plastic shoulder piece that allows you to attach the cape to the figure with some nice detail. But now let's move on to the figure itself, and let's start with the sculpt, which is incredible. I mean, I've gone through my fair share of figures on the channel, and I'm just blown away by this. It's amazing, and Hot Toys just really did an awesome job capturing Wanda's likeness here. Now, first, the face itself. It's just so well done with the paintwork that Hot Toys did here, and there's just so much astounding detail on the skin tones, the shading around her cheeks, and of course the detail work on her eyes and even the lips. It's just uncanny to me, and a testament to the Hot Toys team that they were able to create such a detailed piece. Now, she does include her crown as well, which can't be removed, but it has just as much nice detail work to it with the subtle points at the edges. And then we have to talk about the hair, because at first I thought it looks a little too shiny or too much like just a blob of plastic, but when you really study the sculpt work here, again, just super impressed. There's a ton of detail work and layering, and you'll see later on from behind, if you just take a quick look, you could easily assume it's real. That's how good the detail work is here. Now, as for her suit, and we'll look without the cloak first. First of all, I like the detail in the piece around her neck, and then the different material use on her top with the red plastic dagger looking pieces on top of the printed textured fabric. She also has these long fabric pieces for arms that are meant to simulate gloves, and as an added bonus, they do help to hide the elbow joints. Then you get a nicely detailed belt along with a skirt-like piece that does include some wiring as well for posing, and her pants are nicely textured fabric that has some of that typical MCU detail work with the dark black chevron-like lines along with some red stripes running down her legs. It's overall a really nice looking suit that doesn't feel overly done or overcomplicated, but still has some very nice detail work to it. So overall, just the look of the figure without posing or having her hold accessories really does impress. And while it was a long wait, having her in hand and seeing the great work that went into the figure really makes me appreciate what we have. That doesn't mean there aren't issues. First, I'll start with the electronics. It's not really an issue, more of a pet peeve. So basically her hands light up, and as you can see here, the pegs are actually translucent ball joints so that the red LEDs can light up her hands and the magical effects. I think it's a great feature and concept. But to actually get her hands lit up, you have to remove the fabric glove pieces, put in the batteries, turn on the switch, then cover the arms and attach the hands. So look, for posing and some pictures and videos, great. But from a practical point of view, once you have her in your display posed up and maybe surrounded by other figures, are you really going to go back and do all of these steps required to light up her hands? I doubt it. At least I know that I won't be doing that. So while it's a nice feature, I don't know that it's a very useful one. And I could almost do without. And maybe Hot Toys could have given us some additional accessories for the cost. Or maybe that's just another thing they'll have to innovate on. Having these, because having these requires you to switch out the batteries, and it's really just something that maybe could be done better. But I can't deny that with the translucent hands-on and the magical effects, the light-up feature does add a little something extra to the figure and does help her feel just a little bit more dynamic. And even with the lights off, she still looks good, and the hands even cast a little bit of a red glow on the surface that she's standing on, so it gives her a nice feel. Just to reiterate, I would love to keep these lights on, but the batteries die quick and it's just too much of a hassle to turn them on and off, which is just a shame because even though I didn't think I'd be crazy about them, I have to admit they do make the figure stand out just a little bit more. Other issue here, the elbows. Now, when you remove the sleeve to put the batteries in the forearm, the elbows are clearly double jointed. However, the instructions tell you not to bend beyond the 90-degree angle. Not sure if that's to do with the glove and maybe bending beyond the 90 will destroy the fabric, but it's more of a curiosity as to why Hot Toys stipulated that limit. The other issue, at least with my figure, the shoulder joints. One of the joints was very stiff, and while trying to ratchet it out from her body to create some of the flying poses, it felt like I was at risk of breaking the joint itself. Now, that could just have been my perception, but I ended up just applying some downward force on the joint to sort of hold it in place and avoid putting all the pressure on the peg itself. So just something to be cautious with. And last potential issue here really involves her crown. While it looks great, at some points during posing, I grabbed the sculpt to turn her head, and I could feel the corner tips of the crown flexing a little bit under the pressure. So I would just be cautious with those because I worry that if you're careless, you could potentially break those off. But overall, again, this is a beautiful figure. And the more I was able to pose her and just look at what you were able to do with her, the more I realized how good it is. I think with this release, Hot Toys just continues to show why they're still the top player in the market, at least for now. This does feel like a great quality release, and it just really looks stunning. And the sheer possibilities from posing and just having her stand there are amazing. Sure, the light up feature isn't going to get much use, but it looks amazing. And the figure by herself looks awesome and lets you get some great poses. But add in the cloak with the wired element, and you have even more opportunities to really create a nice display. And even with the flight stand, there's just more you can do with this release, even though she doesn't come with much. And sure, I would have wanted different effect pieces and maybe another set of hands to really hold the dark hold in a more in a better pose. I feel like trying to get her to hold the book was a little bit of a challenge, but even with those issues, I just feel like that's nitpicking. So overall, again, I think it's just an incredible effort here from Hot Toys, and another figure that I'm really happy to have gotten finally after such a long wait, and definitely I think was worth it. So that was a quick look at the Scarlet Witch 6-scale figure from Wandavision by Hot Toys. And all I know is now, having delivered this great figure, I have really big expectations for the upcoming Wanda release from Multiverse of Madness. So hopefully that won't disappoint. Now, let me know your thoughts on this figure or on the Wanda character overall. And as always, thanks for watching. And if you are enjoying the content, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. And we'll touch base on the next video.